nother state. I'm trying to eat down a whole nother plate. Seem like my homies was stuck in the hood. I just told them be safe in the state.
Hey y'all, welcome to the Black Miss Podcast. Welcome to the Black Miss Podcast. I am your co-host, Cam. I'm here with our host, Two Black, and the homie Terrell. How y'all doing today?
Yay.
We're doing that again.
Bro, I love her intro. We're sticking with this.
That's 2 episodes in a row.
We are currently here with a local hood and now somewhat international celebrity. Because Two Black article is taking off like hot fucking fire, and niggas are learning, and that's really the best. I think it's crazy to go from like the things that are essentially your journal entries, because this is the things that keep you up at night.
Yeah.
And then you just go and you edit them, and to see the way that this essay has been taking off, and to see you basically be on a tour of talk shows and interviews and podcasts galore, it's only right that you bring it home and we dissect it in our way today. So how does it feel? You know, I mean, we talk about these things as friends all the time. We tell people all the time that that's kind of how the concept of the podcast came out. These really are what goes through your mind and keeps you up at night. And to see that be put on virtual paper, and to see the way that people are receiving it and asking questions and challenging their own thoughts, like, how does that feel for you?
This is weird.
Cam is
we get to interview our own today.
But
bro, she's a dope ass interviewer. I'm loving this right now.
Oh God. I mean, I honestly haven't even thought about that, to be real. I just be trying to get it out there. So I put no thought into how it feels, other than
fucking humble ass.
What's the next?
Bro.
I'm just being real. Like, I really haven't. When you gotta talk, because I don't want to mess it up. So my mentality is like explaining it the right way versus, man, this is amazing. Like, you know, when you in it, you in it. So honestly, I haven't thought about it. Now, I said this to Terrell, and I wish Ryan was here to say it, but I do feel like that essay, or the essay, is a part of, for people who don't know, the essay is Laundering Black Rage. Y'all see that? For people who don't know, the essay is Laundering Black Rage, that is published in Black Agenda Report, and I've done a variety of interviews on it. We're going to talk about that today to debunk the myth profiting off of Black death. We'll get into what we mean by that, or why we think that's a myth. And in this case, it's a partial myth. It's not a total myth. But anyway, I don't know. I feel like it's a process of being on this show and working with y'all. I don't feel like I could have wrote it, you know, without y'all and without y'all. Well, not just when we're on air, but when we're off air and sending it to people, having random conversations with y'all about whatever, all the different analogies and the way we just connect shit that shouldn't make sense. So, you know, there's no way this would exist without this podcast, without this crew. So I definitely want to appreciate y'all for that. So this is a communal effort. You never write anything alone. Anybody thinks you do is lying.
I will say that's real. That's real as hell. That's real as hell, because when he's in the middle of writing something, or when it's time for us to do a podcast or whatever, he'll call me before, or hell, sometimes after. He'll, you know, randomly hit me up, and half the time I'm probably already 2 or 3 shots in and finishing the 4th.
At least, yeah.
And I feel like when he says he like uses our energy and our questions and stuff to go into his writings and everything, that's real. Because like, I'll ask him questions about things that I generally don't understand, and this essay that he wrote, I generally don't understand. But even no, even like with the essay, like, I was waiting for this episode because I'm like, I can read it, listen to the podcast and everything, but once he goes deep into it with these episodes that we bring to you guys, this is where even I'm still learning. I'm learning stuff, and I'm sure it's the same for Cam. And you know, it might not be the same for Black because he wrote the shit, but
nah, it is. That's what I'm saying. Like even talking to even the interviews I've done, or even doing this, I probably have learned something different or saw a different perspective.
yeah,
If you write good shit, you often write past your own intellect. So like you're often writing because you get to your best self to write something, and you don't stay there. Like you get your best, you put your best shit on paper, and then you come back to your mediocre level. So I
think that's why I love this podcast so much because I learn so much and it gets broken down to like I'm not a dumb nigga by any
at all. Please don't try. Don't try.
No. But I'm still learning a lot, and I still want to learn a lot, and I get to learn a lot from the podcast. So even if there's stuff that I didn't get to ask Black or anybody else about, it comes up in the podcast, and I'm like, that's the answer I was looking for.
I think it's important to give our people our flowers just a little bit and remind Black that he's not shit because his head is big enough. But
this nigga really ain't shit though.
As a person, as an academic, quite lovely, quite brilliant. But I think to see, it's kind of crazy because I mean, we say it all the time, like the concept of this pod came about from conversations we were having collectively, conversations we've been having with people all over, and recognizing there's a need to be able to make sense of the world that we're living in. And not enough niggas are taking the things that we see, that we learn, that we're reading, that can seem very complex, and then be able to have a conversation and delineate that out to the masses in a manner that is like actually palatable, and that you are like, oh, I understand what that means. This is actually not as complicated as I thought. And I mean, like we say all the time, we are learning, we're growing. And so, I think that's also ironic that you were like, this just feels like the work that I needed to do. And you haven't even allowed yourself to sit in it and soak in it and be like, what does this mean to me? Which is very ironic because when we talk about like the myth or, the partial myth of profiting off Black death, there's so many people who are quick to go put a book out, an article on world tour, a news tour, because they're trying to make a dollar. And you are just like, I did this because this was what was on my mind and I wanted to get it out. And the fact that niggas are receiving it well and want to talk about it is the whole goal. So, even though you hate the spotlight, I couldn't resist. We got a little celebrity in the house today, and this is about as much of that as I'm gonna give. We're doing a gang salute
for Too Black.
So now we're going back to being a humble little family and remind you that you still not shit. And so let's hop into this.
That feels better.
Fuck this nigga. Real quick, can we shout out Cam's earrings?
What are Hotep earrings?
I like them.
Let me live.
Fuck you.
And this is why we say you not shit. The flowers I just gave you, I'm ready to beat you with them.
Oh God. All right. I don't even know where to go from here. Thank you. I'll just say thank you. But
so, hey, right now we want to shout out some of the patrons that listen to our podcast and support us. They donate. Real quick, Too Black is going to shout those out. And yeah, go ahead, bro.
Yeah, so the people have signed up. I think since the last time we announced patrons, we had TK1.
Shout out.
Thank you.
Sparrowhawk.
Thank you.
Matt Siegfried.
Thank you.
Einer Posh. I don't know if I'm saying some of these right.
Thank you.
Martin Hernandez.
Bro, how is it that he can write whole essays and everything? He can't pronounce names and shit. Hey, shout out to y'all just because he's not gonna say your names right.
This next one I'm gonna get right though. Watch. Sam Jackson.
Y'all. We appreciate y'all.
Sam Jackson. I got that. That was easy.
Bro, Sam Jackson. That's the easiest name.
Yes.
Was there an L in that? Let me find out. Samuel L. Jackson is listening to our pod. That would be.
Hey, I try not to give I try to name the money that people gave, but if that's Samuel L. Jackson, you could give us a little more money than that.
Just know. all the Patreon supporters, I'm taking a sip for y'all. I appreciate it.
Two more, Michael Kelly and then Melanie Jones. So shout out to them. That's a decent number in the last month or so. And if
I
you
appreciate y'all, gang.
if you pledge, you'll get shouted out as well. So yeah, but yeah, thank you. On to the episode.
If don't nobody appreciate y'all, real appreciate y'all.
So the myth again is, if you clicked on the episode, you already know is profiting off of Black Death. Again, we'll get to why that's partially a myth and why part of that is true, but we're gonna use the essay I wrote, Laundering Black Rage, because I think I get at this argument, or I think I resolved this contradiction within this myth in the essay, and then just to try to understand how Black Rage, that when Black people get angry at an obvious injustice or oppression, that rage is funneled to benefit the state as opposed to benefiting us, because we don't really own our own rage, right? So this episode
concept, we don't even own our own rage.
Yeah,
that's god damn.
It pisses me off. Just
bro, like I can't even have my own rage.
Yeah. So
shit that I suffer from being Black.
Yeah, it goes back to them. So I'm gonna since this is our show, I'm gonna read more, because a lot of these shows I've talked about what I wrote. So I want to actually read the words on paper.
I'm gonna read aloud.
It might make y'all read it, but read the words on paper. This would be fulfilling as what would typically be the monologue. So this is the intro to the essay, and then we're gonna get directly into the myth, and we'll come back to the essay just for people, just so you can follow. For stolen lands to remain colonized, for investments to remain profitable, for white capital to remain ruthless, Black rage must be neutralized. Black rage, the omnipresent force radiating throughout the anxieties of the state, is a boundless threat to the capitalist order. Like a big bang, Black rage began its expansion into colonial existence at the exact moment that the first African was plucked from their roots and cast down into the sunken dungeon of the European slave ship. Its expansion is the survival of the human spirit, serving as a potential death knell to oppression, ringing its bell with smoldering waves of resistance quietly hissing in infamy. Black rage finds its expression in the assisted asphyxiation of the slave trader, accompanied by the seizure of their ship. The alleviation of the slave master's heartbeat, seasoned by the enslaved maid, the transformation of the settler city-state into a community fireplace, the riot of the unheard. When politicized against white capital, Black rage blossoms into an anti-colonial weapon. Black rage harmonizes the anger that the colony tunes out. It synchronizes our struggle. It's an ode to the bold notion that our discontent is undeniably justified. Black rage is justice outlawed by the state. The state, as defined by Dr. Rasul Mawad, shout out to Rasul, geography and American studies scholar, in his book, The Geographies of Threat and Production of Violence, is, quote, the configuration of the power of government, corporate interest, classes of elites, upper levels of bureaucratic management class that implements the ruling class's goals and aims that sits atop an accumulated economic base, end quote. Thus, the state is incapable of coexisting with Black rage in its most potent form. It's too combustible of a substance to tolerate in the open market. When unleashed on white capital's economic base, Black rage sets aflame all its market principles: genocide, dispossession, slavery, and profit. Attempts to outright suppress this substance only further stokes the flames of rebellion. Conversely, supporting its unfettered spread is state suicide. So whether it's suppressed or supported, explosion is imminent. As a result, Black rage cannot be entirely controlled, only managed. To manage Black rage, it must be laundered like the blood money that birthed it. To launder Black rage into the market, its potency must be defanged. The social capital that produces the clarion call by the Black masses for a free and equitable world must be snatched and funneled into the hands of the state, cleaned of the original people and conditions that manufactured its existence, but still recognizable enough to appear untraced. Laundering may manifest in a litany of forms, including tax havens, structural adjustment programs, non-profiteering, municipal bonds, drug dealing, etc. But ultimately, laundering is the logic of the state. Historically, as white capital was looting people, land, and resources, they gradually erected competing institutional fronts, including government, commerce, media, and religion, to manage and codify their conquests, i.e., the state. Henceforth, practically everything built under the rule of the Western state is a front for white capital. Ergo, what first appears to be inspired by Black Rage is reduced to simulacra. The self-determination of Black power is pigeonholed to front Black capitalism. The anger and suffering of the Black poor has liquidated to front rich Black entertainers' ambitions. The courage of Black militancy is strangulated to front state repression, and on the laundering flows. At the helm of nearly each sheep-herding front squats the Black elite, feeding off the breadcrumbs bribed to them by white capital. With each commodity, laundering repurposes the crimes of white capital and the opposing threats against their rule to legitimate their rule. The imperial laundering strengthens with every cycle as the illegitimate crimes of the past fund the legitimate crimes of the present. Black Rage is the repercussion of each crime, the deafening echo from the past roaring into the decadence of the present. To muzzle the roar, the state dispossesses the labor of Black Rage and harnesses it into a commodity that can be consumed harmlessly as if its original potency is retained. Stated plainly, Black people do not own our rage. More precisely, we are robbed of our rage with the coercive aim to legitimize the state. This process supersedes everyone of good and bad faith, spilling its blood on all involved. A grand conspiracy need not be necessary when our immediate material interests are linked to the maintenance of the state. To further understand this metamorphosis of Black Rage, an examination of money laundering itself is first required. All right, so that's the intro. Okay, so that may have made no sense, or maybe it did. I don't know. Did it make any sense, Terrell? Terrell said it doesn't make any sense.
Terrell, stop.
Okay, no, so it does make sense in the fact that Black Rage is definitely something that has to be controlled or subdued, or like you said, commoditized to where it's like something we can profit off of, or swelter down by whatever means. That way we keep the system that we have in place moving. Because the way I think of it, at least, if Black Rage was like, a kettle or a pot bubbling over, as soon as you want to put a lid on top of it so it doesn't overflow, of course. It's okay
Right.
to have like that. Yeah, we can profit off of Black Rage. We can do this, that, and the third with it, since it's gonna be there. Like, I feel like the system has already put safeguards in place for Black Rage, to manifest itself, to where we know it's going to be there, but you're putting the pot or the lid on the pot right where you need it, so it's not bubbling over to where we have our revolution where we want and everything.
Right, but you still let it sizzle.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yeah. No,
And the few times that things actually boiled over and shit got a little messy, they just figured out a way to keep that lid on even tighter and wipe that shit up.
Or when it does boil over, there's a contingency plan for that.
Yeah.
They've already figured out how to put some foil underneath on the stove, so that way you're not messing the stove up, but we're gonna be able to get this up there.
Right.
Because that's just
Look how I made an analogy and everybody built off of that shit.
smart niggas. Like,
All right, so the argument, just to give people like the basis of why we're calling this a myth, and we're gonna get into details on it, but like essentially, as I stated in the essay, I'll read that too. The actual quote. Often the charge is made that said institutions are, quote, profiting off Black Rage. This is only half true, since Black people are killed daily with impunity, yet not a single donation, grant, loan, or even a thought is generated on most days. It is a threatening response to death, Black Rage, that activates the laundering. Black death is merely an ingredient. So Black people die every day, and most days there's no donations made. We're going to get into because that was written after running down the slew of money that just flew in 2020 after George Floyd's murder. Most days we just move on about our lives. There's not anything extra. There's no surplus of money to profit from, other than the way that the state is always profiting off of Black death in general. But what do people mean when they say profiting off of Black death? I think it's important to clarify that, because often I think there's a real thing that people are getting at. That's why I say it's half true. It's not that that Black death does not contribute to folks benefiting. No, we're not saying that. Just want to make sure that's clear. We're not saying that. It's just to say that there's something else that brings out this extra money where somebody can get a book deal, or BLM could buy a mansion or whatever. BLM got that surplus of funds after 2020, then they bought a mansion. They didn't buy a mansion in 2014. They didn't have the money, so the book deals came after niggas was on the streets. If everybody got a book deal every day somebody was killed, everybody would have a book deal, right?
There would be no New York Times bestseller. It would just be books after books after books. Yeah.
So that just doesn't really hold up. So it's Black folks' actual rage, and not just in our minds and our feelings, but the labor that our rage produces, like the actual things we go out on the street and do things.
Well, okay. So when you ask that question, the way I think of it, at least, is one, it gets politicized, and political dollars are everything when it comes to this type of shit. Mm-hmm. Hell, even what was it? Andre Carson.
Yeah, he's the for people who don't know, that's the congressman in the district where Indianapolis is.
Yeah, where I live at. So
yeah,
I can imagine he got a lot of political dollars, a lot of votes, a lot of whatever, and nothing against him. I'm not, whatever. But when I went to one of the protests after George Floyd, wasn't Drayshawn Reed a little bit before?
Drayshawn Reed was May 6th, and then of 2020. And Drayshawn Reed, for people who don't know, was a brother that was killed in Indianapolis, who was running from the police. That claimed that while he was running from the police, that he turned around with a gun and tried to shoot the police. There's no evidence of this, but that was the claim. So that was May 6th, and then May 25th.
George Floyd, the 25th.
Yeah, May 25th, Memorial Day, was George Floyd.
Right. So sometime after that, there was a rally and a protest in Indianapolis, and me and my wife went out. We did the whole thing, and the whole time, like, I'm hearing, like, they got Andre Carson to speak, and I'm hearing him speaking everything, and I'm like, this just sounds like he's gaining political dollars from this. Like, he's gaining nothing.
Yeah, he's taking advantage. Like, people will say, another thing in politics is you always have there's no tragedy you don't take advantage of. But again, the tragedy or the death, it's an incomplete thing, because it's like the people have to labor to bring enough attention for someone like Andre Carson to even be able to cash in on it. Yeah, if they just shoot someone like the police do all the time, then there's not going to be any reason for Andre Carson to be on the news. But if they shoot someone and then that's something that's on camera that we then are outraged about, and we go to the streets and we make social media campaigns, whatever people do, I'm not judging the type of tactics people choose here either. That's what generates the attention, right? That's what generates it. So to say people are profiting off of Black death is incomplete, because they're also profiting off of the labor of the people that are enraged about the death, right? So it's like, that's the part that I'm trying to like get at here. So with like the things that people will say are profiting, right? Like we talked about book deals with the mansion. Sean King is in I don't know how many scandals. So
Jesus
that's his own.
How is he not got beat up yet? Like I just think not enough people. You want to talk about being angry? Like people need to get punched in the face more. Maybe that. Yeah.
Again, the rage doesn't get directed in the right direction, clearly. So people get.
I am sick of it.
Hey, just a disclaimer: the Black Myths podcast does not promote any physical violence towards.
Yes,
anyone.
We do.
We do not. If you choose to do that, you acted on your own behalf. That's a better way of putting it.
There you go. There you go.
But if what we have to say just, has you recognize that the next person that tries you doesn't deserve you to talk to them nice, and they deserve you to backhand them, then by all means, slap somebody.
Yeah, but it's your choice.
It's your choice.
Yeah.
You cannot be like, put Cam on the Blackness podcast.
No.
We did not influence that choice.
That is an independent decision.
To do that.
If you thought about what we said, that's on you. You press play, as they say.
Exactly.
But yes, you got Sean King, got book deals. And then you have this major swath of like diversity and inclusion, DEI. And you have people getting diversity jobs, whether it's in the actual diversity departments. You have black folks that are getting elevated because the company wants to show that they care about racism all of a sudden. And it's usually people that are not nearly in the position that George Floyd would be in. People usually are more affluent black folks. And you see a bunch of people benefiting off of it. So it's
bias trainings.
Yeah, all of this shit.
The step up, sit down,
privilege walks, whatever. You've seen like we've seen like an explosion of this. People I think mischaracterize it as woke, but that's not the term we're going to use here. But you see this explosion and money just pour in, and also you see in 2020 you saw these diversity statements about how we support Black Lives Matter and we believe
I put 2 black squares on my Instagram. Got white people at work just wanting to remind you they put the black squares up.
Right. So there's black folks who are in a position to benefit from that, right? But then we come back to the word profit, and what we talked about last episode with Marxism and what profit actually means. So even when people say profit, I don't think people are trying to be scientific when they use this term. So it's not necessarily a knock, but since our job is to analyze it, profit isn't simply just making money. It's that a certain amount of labor was done, and then you take a portion of that labor, don't give it to the person who did the work, and then you take that and you take that money and you either keep it or then you put it into making more money elsewhere. That's what he calls surplus labor. So Terrell works 20 hours. Terrell produces $3,000 of what's your job? $30,000 of whatever. Yeah. Terrell gets paid, $1,000 of the $30,000 he produces. The other $29,000 goes to the company. That's called profit. That's surplus labor. Because what Terrell produced in his time, he does not get. So when we talk about people, say what?
I said not by far. Bro.
Yeah, Terrell doesn't get that. None of us do if we're workers.
Quantify the damn labor educators.
Nah, it's just
we cannot even use that for a real example anymore.
So if a nigga gets a book deal or somebody gets a raise or somebody gets a promotion, and people are like, well, they're profiting off of Black Death. Even if that were true, there's a job that's profiting off of the person they're giving that promotion to. There is a publishing company and all the companies that make the actual pages and all the actual companies that own these things that are profiting off of it. The person who writes the book, I could say if you write a book, you're not seeing most of the money. If you're an author, you're not seeing most. So even if you are trying to cash in on that, you're not going to see most of the money that comes from that book. This isn't to let these people off the hook. It's to say that we often will target the black folks who are getting like the crumbs of the profit, but it's the companies that put up the money for these people to exist in the first place, for these organizations to pimp off of it. So I think, go ahead.
Would it be fair to say that's only marginally true, like fractionally?
What's marginally true?
That, like the example you gave, just with me, like I'm benefiting off of Black Rage. I'm only getting a very small percent.
Yeah, it's marginally true. Like if we're like, okay, if we're like George Floyd got killed, so we as our company want to show that, Terrell, or we care about racism, or we care about ending racism or whatever, then we're going to give Terrell a $2 raise. You could say you marginally benefited from it, but the company is benefiting more by saying that they gave you the raise.
Exactly.
And then, you know what I'm saying? So like
then just going off of that example right there, the $2 raise that's not nothing. That's nothing.
Yeah.
Or even if I would compare it to the systematic racism that
no, it's nothing. And even if they even if they gave you a better job, like even if you got a promotion or
I'm still working. Like
yeah, you're still. It don't matter unless they gave you the company. Literally, they're still.
Unless you have the means of production now, it's in your hands, and all the money you're getting is going back into the community.
That would be a win if our rage could force them to give us the means of production, then we've actually done the right. Then they didn't launder it, then we won. But that's a different conversation. But yes,
politicians, these Instagram activists that are just exploiting and making money off of it. Their crumbs are still big ass crumbs. Yeah, but they're not the only one eating. They're not. They're by far. Like they may have got a steak dinner, but somebody else has the whole farm and could have steak on tap.
Exactly. Social media benefits just by you creating activity and engagement on there. That's why you've seen now that people realize, like corporations realize they can exploit that and make money off of it, because it's like, oh, you're going to bring your rage to Twitter. So how can we exploit that? Like, that's the thing that's really behind it. That's what I'm trying to write about in the essay. Is like, the state and the different parts of the apparatus of the state are the ones funneling this, and then we jump in and fill certain slots. So the people at the top, or the bourgeois, the black, as I call it in the essay, the black elite, they fill the slots, but so they should be held fully accountable, but they're not driving this. They don't have the power to do it if they wanted to. So even if these are the most, like Sean King, he's not black, but I'm saying even if these are the most, like, the worst people you could think of, they don't have enough power.
The worst people we could think of.
Right, the worst person.
Candace Owens.
There's only so much they can do because they just don't have the power. They don't own the means of production. So it's just important to make that point. I think Samaria Rice, who's the mother of Tamir Rice, said it best. I think hustling off Black Death, is much more apropos. Still, I think Black Rage is important to underline. But calling it hustling versus profiting, I think clarifies, because that's these people are hustling. Like the people that we tend to like accuse of this, they're hustling. The profiteering really is the people that are funding them. Yeah. They're hustling.
Even when we go into that, even when we go into that, just for niggas like me, we got to define what type of hustling we're doing here.
Yeah.
Right.
So this ain't the hustling like, oh, I'm making end meets, I'm getting money, I'm doing it. This is not that type of hustling. This is where, from personal experience, when I would shoot pool with somebody that doesn't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. You seen it on there.
Yeah.
Like, I'm pulling a hustle, I'm pulling a game. Like, I'm pulling a scam here.
I'm grifting.
Scamming is probably the better word.
Yeah. I'm a mark. I'm taking advantage of a mark,
like
right?
You're the mark.
Yeah.
You're the mark. Like,
but for the system, when Black people are dying, we're the mark.
Yeah. Exactly. Like if and
so is the rage. Yeah.
And berries are poor. Like I spotted out who I'm gonna hustle. I'm gonna go off of this nigga like, hey, we're just gonna do $1 gamer here to $20 a ball. It's not that big a deal. I got a little money and I've seen you win a couple games. So you're gonna be my mark. You're gonna be the person that I'm going after. And I'm gonna say, like, hey, look, I'm not that great at pool, but I want to have some fun with it. So let's put some money down. The first game, I'm gonna let you win.
Yeah.
Right. So in comparison to that, when it comes to like George Floyd and all that, when it comes to getting these convictions and stuff like that on police officers, I'm gonna make it feel like you won.
Right.
And then that's when the next game comes into play. And the third game, if we're playing 2 out of 3.
Right, and then
show you where my skill
They're like,
is.
I'm gonna tell you we're gonna pass the bill. I'm gonna tell you we're gonna, defund the police departments. I'm gonna tell you we're gonna pour into schools. I'm gonna tell you we're gonna do these DEI initiatives, and then that shit's gonna disappear. Nothing is going to materialize from it, but they had asked for all your donations. They saw the donations flood in. They talked to people who were like, you know what, I'm going to support you because you seem like the person who's actually going to be about something. I followed behind these people. We march, we do all of these things, and then nothing came about it. Or on the flip side, you have white folks who are going to also take that same thing and like, oh, do you see them looting? Do you see this? Do you see these angry Black people? Like, you need to support us so we can quell that shit, so we can stop this, so it doesn't end up in your neighborhood next. They want to take the police off the street. And that is, and it literally actively on all sides saying, how can we make this profitable for the system? How can we make this profitable for the state?
Yeah, that's the laundering.
It's the grand hustle. Like,
I think Imani Perry was saying how like there are market exchanges happening. People are making money because news agencies, publishers, and civic and professional organizations need interpreters of these moments when people are dying. We are expected to be Black, eloquent, and knowledgeable enough to enlighten their general white audience. But little of the money that is circulating within this movement actually ends up with the families of the victims of police killings. The vast majority goes to a professional class of spokespeople, the organizers, the writers, and the academics.
Yep.
And yet the killings continue. So whether we deliberately hustle Black death or not, it is without question a nefarious hustle. The evidence of this can be found in how much actually stays the same. We are still hashtagging names 7 years after Tamir's death, 9 years after Trayvon, 1 year after George Floyd, and there are literally thousands of names we'll never even know. I mean, even today, driving down, we can see people holding signs for funerals and having car washes.
Bro.
Yeah.
It's a hustle.
Yeah, and it's like, and that's why, like, laundering for me, it was just like, that's what all of this, that's what capitalism is. That was when I was just thinking about it. But like she said, there's names we don't know, and I just think, I don't know, sometimes people, we just want to go over some numbers real quick. Like most police killings, like we already discussed, never make it to any real like swell rage. Like most of the time, it's a back page story. So like in the United States, I want to deal with Black death internationally. We want to start with the United States here, but like in the United States, about in the last 10 years, about 1,000 to 1,200 people die from the police, according to mapping police violence. About 1,000, 1,200 people get killed by the police. That's everybody. That's not just Black folks. And then about 250 to 300 of those deaths are Black on a given year. This is a kind of a scale. So most of the time, there's also just the fact that if someone's armed, we feel like they deserved it just automatically. If you say they're armed, we just like whatever. Like there's not a real protest. It's the unarmed Black man you often hear. That's a whole nother myth we probably should cover. The unarmed Black man is when people are like, they didn't deserve to die, but if they were armed, it's not even like you never see any real outrage, hardly ever.
Which is wild, because even then, a large portion of folks who are armed were not actively trying to shoot back.
Right.
Didn't even have the opportunity to reach. And most of the time, when we've been able to find out about these things, they'll say didn't even know they had a weapon on them until after they were shot.
Yeah.
After they were killed. Then they find the gun. And so
right.
Then the news story wants to say the armed person, but nobody knew they were even armed until they were already dead.
Yeah, armed is like a code word for like unimportant, like they deserved it, right? So 160 to 220 out of this 1,000, 1,200, about 160 to 120 are considered armed murders or armed killings by the police. The rest are either unarmed, they were probably in some kind of vehicle, or they're unclear. That's what the stats say. And then I do gotta bring up one point for the armed situation, because people like me here in Indiana, where they recently passed a law, it's basically constitutional carry. You don't need a license. You just need to be, 18 or 21 years older or whatever, and no felonies to carry a pistol. Okay, so if I get shot by the police, whether I pulled my firearm or my firearm was on my hip or in my glove compartment, I am considered armed. Yeah. Because it implies a certain dangerousness that may not even be true, right? And in some cases, I'll say this. I said this on our pod a long time ago. If someone with a gun is chasing me, and I turn around with my gun, that's if the police weren't in the encounter, that would make sense. If Terrell was chasing me and he had a gun and then I took my gun, it would make sense for me to turn around. Since a man's chasing me with the gun, it would make sense for me to turn around my gun to match him. But when it becomes the police, all of a sudden the logic goes out of the room, and we should
I saw a video sadly that had been circulating of this kid. He was in the he had just came out of a drive-through and is literally like sitting in a parking lot eating. Police come up to him. He rolls down his window and they immediately tell him to get out. And he like freaks out, and the officer starts shooting at him, and he's driving away. And he ends up like in the hospital. They catch all that jazz, but it's just like fight or flight is a normal response.
Yeah.
So how did this kid know that here I am just eating my fucking burger? I don't know who rolling up to me on in my car and just pulls out a weapon. Now I got guns in my face, and yet the onus is always on us as citizens. We should just know better. We should just know that this is a uniform and your gun in my face
as Black citizens,
my natural intuition should just stop, and I should automatically have a part of my brain that says this is a police officer, not a threat. I shut the fuck up and just do what they say.
And you
not read a scientific article yet that says there is a portion of my brain that will turn off for that.
That doesn't make any sense. Like you see, I mean, there's incidents of this. Like there was just after George Floyd in Minneapolis, there was a brother who was laying down. He was asleep. The police break into, even though they say they got rid of no-knock warrants, they don't knock. They barge in his crib. This is on video, actually. I don't remember the brother's name off the top of my head. They run up on his couch. They have their body cams on. All this shit that people protested for was supposed to be in place. They run up. He's waking up. He sees somebody run up in his crib. He reaches for his gun, and they cap him, and that's it. Right, that's what I'm saying. That those sort of arm thing, we really should. That's really something we need to deal with more. I mean, again, that's really another episode, but like we need to deal with more. I mean, even Breonna Taylor, that situation, they didn't knock. The boyfriend is wakes up, shoots at the door because he don't know who the fuck's in his apartment, and then she gets killed. You know what I mean? Like it. Like so,
like because I would react the same way. Like I'm not going into what. So
stand your ground. Don't count. If I didn't know the police was in my house.
Yeah.
But if somebody's knocking on my door, breaking in my apartment while I'm just asleep or whatever, and I don't know what's going on, I'm reaching on my nightstand. I'm grabbing my pistol. I'm grabbing my shotgun, and whatever happens after that happens.
Yeah, it's all in the game. So, I mean, that's why.
Especially considering where I'm at.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Bro, I'm in
there should be even more outrage if somebody was armed and defending themselves. And, but that's the job of the media. Bro. That's a part of the job of the media, is to make sure that we as people, which is also very ironic to me in a country that continuously, votes for gun rights, despite the folks who, are actively working against it, to each their own. That when those situations happen, the response is not the same.
No, because
at all. And I was like, but your politics, they very different.
Right. You believe in stand your ground, and
unless it's a Black person.
Yeah, self-defense.
Unless they're Hispanic, unless they're a Black or brown person of color,
or poor or whatever. Yeah, then or disabled. Yeah, then it's like
if they are spoken about, they get silenced because like. Even in like the Breonna Taylor case and stuff, like I watch a lot of YouTube and I've seen videos where there are white 2A advocates where like, no, he did what he was supposed to do. The government is wrong. The police are wrong for this, but that gets silenced.
That doesn't get highlighted or lifted up to the main discourse. Or
that doesn't feed their agenda, and therefore it's not something that can be elevated.
And it's always after the fact. So it's like, regardless, this person has been shot or killed. It
boils down to it's a Black person using a gun. That's what it really boils down to.
So yeah, like I said, that one. But I just want to highlight the whole arm thing, because I just feel like that is its own. We need to get off of that shit.
Yeah.
Like we really do. Because I something I say like. Or something I wrote in my notes, like, can we name 5 Black people who get killed by the police every year? Most of us couldn't. You know what I mean? So there's 250 to 300 Black folks on average that are going to get killed every year. We probably can't name 5. And I challenge anybody listening to go to a given year and think if you can name more than 5. If you can, you probably won't get to 10. And that's not an indictment necessarily on anyone individually. It's just to show you. That's why that goes back to the myth that if it's just about profiting off of Black death, then all 1,200 murder, or not 12, all 300 murders or killings, they're not technically murders depending on how you define it, but all the killings, you know, that everybody be profiting off of that. That's 300. That's almost enough. That's like one Black person gets killed by the police a day. And this is just the police. People say Black death. That encompasses many other things. This is just police killings. This isn't dealing with other stuff. When we look at other types of Black death that often don't get any attention, this is a very interesting stat. I'm going to try to make this make sense. This is a book called The Plague of Prisons by Ernest Drucker. He's a epidemiologist, and he did an interesting, epidemiologists often do the thing called years of lives lost. So like if you have a certain health condition, they'll count like how many years of life have you lost based on a certain life expectancy based on that condition. So he says for the last 35 years, and this book was written in 2011. So the numbers here are actually worse in today than they are in this quote.
For those who don't know what an epidemiologist is, they study disease.
Right. Okay. Good. Thank you. For the last,
I did not know.
Thank you.
We do
for the last quote, for the last 35 years in the United States had over 7 million drug incarcerations with a minimum of 14 million years of life lost. This is equivalent to the years of life lost with 350,000 deaths in a population of a similar age, more than the number of U.S. soldiers killed in World War II and all the wars since. To this must be added almost 2 million drug offenders on parole or probation, lives not lost, but often greatly diminished by long-lasting effects of incarcerations and its aftermath of their lives. He also goes on to compare this to the AIDS crisis and 9/11, and basically to say that you add up the drug war in the country, and this is a book written in 2011. There's more, the years of life lost. Basically, like if you're in prison, you're not going to make it to the life expectancy level that most people will. You're going to die usually earlier, or your life is going to be so greatly diminished that they just count that as a year of life lost. Like, so it's like when you add that up, you're talking about 350,000 people that have essentially died if you were to like add up all those years of life lost within a 35-year period. But there's not any real outrage about this on most days. Most people think people in prison deserve it. And most of the time, unless they're if they're quote unquote non-violent offenders, which is another binary that needs to be killed off. But like, if it's not that, because most people, I was just on a call with one of the Pendleton too before we got on here, and he was saying most of us in here are in here for quote unquote violent crime. He's like, if you were to reduce non-violent crime, that really wouldn't deal with a lot of the problems, you know, because even when you're in the drug game, that can come with quote unquote violent crimes. When we deal with health. This is out of a Washington Post piece. Black Americans are 75% more likely to live near a polluting facility such as a factory or refinery. This in part explains why even before this pandemic, Black children had a 500% higher death rate from asthma than white children. Right. So it's like, there's again, if it's just Black death, this is happening. This is what I mean by it's happening every day. Weathering. This is an interesting study. That basically looks at all the different health impacts that racism has on Black people, and they concluded that Black women experience the most stress out of this. It says U.S. Black experience early health deterioration significantly above that of whites. So stuff that kicks in at 60 years old for white people often will kick in at 50 years for Black folks because of the overall stress that racism covers on people.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because like, there has been debate swirling through the interwebs of people coming at Auntie Tab, and I don't like that because, you know, if you don't know who Tabitha Brown is, you should. She talks about like health and wellness. She went vegan because she wanted to like get her life together, get her health together, and is just a genuinely, for the most part, positive human being who is just like, life sucks, I'm gonna eat well and I'm gonna try my best to just be better. And so she had made this quote when her cookbook came out, talking about how, like, you know, she recognized that in order for her to like break the generational curse of disease in her family, that like it needed to start with the food. And of course, people went berserk because what she said was only half true, you know, and everybody and their mom was chewing her out for not also adding in the systemic racism that plays a huge factor into a lot of Black folks' health issues.
Yeah.
And y'all need to be beating Auntie Tabba because she wasn't not acknowledging that. But when I do think of how the mainstream media does not acknowledge that as well, or it's always just blamed on like soul food, or it's always just blamed on we use too much butter, too much cheese, and it's like, yes, food plays a role in your gut health, but so does stress. Every aspect of systemic racism is going to literally weather and break down a Black body far more than the fact that I chose to eat some chicken wings and some collard greens with hella hot sauce, butter, and salt. It's like, should you eat healthier? Yes, but just you eating healthier is actually not going to stop the effects that racism is going to have on your body. You're still going to be losing years of your life because of it. And they're not going to talk about that. But even for poor Black folks who may not be able to afford like healthier food and it's still eating highly processed food, highly sugar-filled food, eating fast food when needed, going to grab your Little Caesars pizza because you have a family to feed and that's affordable, do what you got to do. But that alone isn't going to be the reason why your child's cholesterol is high. It's not going to be the only thing that
or hypertension or
to have diabetes, etc. But consistently the narrative is put on us that we are the ones that are fully responsible for our health, our death. And personal responsibility is only a very small role in that. You can eat healthy as much as you want, but living in this shitty ass world, in this shitty ass society, being stressed out all the time, I could have a heart attack tomorrow.
Yeah. I mean, like, because another thing about the weathering thing is they found, particularly with Black women, but it was across the board with Black people. Black women had the highest points in the weathering, even when they weren't poor. They had the highest points. So poverty wasn't the only factor that contributed to it. So to Cam's point, it wasn't simply
micro and macro aggressions at work play a role as well. Holy shit! They don't just piss me off; they're literally destroying my body from the inside out.
Yeah. So it's like that again, but this is the shit that's happening every day, right? Like this is not just something that gets politicized or publicized or where I rate like. And I'm not saying Black people have the energy to be that pissed off about everything every day. It's almost impossible to respond to everything like we responded to George Floyd. It would take an almost unimaginable amount of energy and organization to do so. But it's to point out that, you know, if it's just Black death, then there would be more energy every day, not just the stuff that often gets highlighted when our rage is taken advantage of and funneled somewhere, right? It's not, that's why, as I say, it's incomplete. Lastly, just to touch on a more international aspect, sanctions is something that people don't deal with. So sanctions, for people who don't know, is when the United States says that Cuba is we're going to sanction Cuba, or really Cuba has an entire blockade. So Cuba ultimately can't trade with certain countries because then the United States will sanction those countries too. So if you need products in your nation, very simple things, like if you need something for like vaccines, for instance, Cuba had struggled to get some of the materials they needed to make vaccines, even though they were able to do it through their own ingenuity, because the United States has sanctioned them. So typically, if I want to get something, let's say Terrell's a country and I'm a country, if I want to get something from Terrell, if there's not a sanction, Terrell can send me whatever I need in my country so I can develop what I need to take care of my people. If you sanction a country, they can't get those things that they need to take care of their people, and often people starve and die from that. And the point of sanctions is to create enough turmoil amongst the population that they'll overthrow, quote unquote, the leader of the country. This often doesn't work. It just hardens them even more against the U.S., or it creates mass immigration, you know, from like people just fleeing the country because they don't have what they need to take care of themselves. And then you end up with a quote unquote border crisis or whatever. But the United States, for instance, sanctioned half of Latin America. So what did you expect was going to happen? They either sanction or they destabilize these places by overthrowing their leaders or whatever. So there's numbers you can look at, like once a country has been sanctioned, like what happens. So in Haiti, you know, a Black country, this is an audit report. This is a 1993 study. And this is based off sanctions. These are numbers that they found. So A reported nearly 3,000 children aged 5 or younger died in Haiti every month. According to the study, that figure increased by about 1,000 children per month. There are about 1 million children under the age of 5 in Haiti, which has a population of about 7 million. Sanctions directly contributed to as many as 100,000 new cases of moderate, severe malnutrition suffered by children. This is a 1993 study called Sanctions in Haiti, Crisis and Humanitarian Action. The United States sanctioned Venezuela. This is an older study from 2019. It said U.S. sanctions killed over 40,000 Venezuelans since 2017. So this is another thing people. So again, that's Black Death too, because a lot of people in Venezuela are Black. Haiti is a Black nation. Cuba has all these places that have Black people. That because Black people are not just in America or in the United States. So like, there's no outrage about that in many
Black or Latin people.
Yeah. So I'm just saying, like, we're all across the world, and these are just snippets. Like, if we were doing episodes on sanctions, there's a lot more to be said on that. But like,
a whole lot.
Yeah, that's just a snippet on like, and then currently Haiti is enraged against the government and the failed administration of the government there, and then the what is the word I'm looking for? The meddling of foreign foreign capital in their country, and they're protesting against that. But the United States is using that rage. I might write about this too as a front to potentially invade the country. The UN's talking about this too, to potentially invade it and then quote unquote restore democracy. And that's not So these are just examples to show if people really are profiting off of Black Death in the way that folks often say they are. These deaths are happening every day. Now, as we say also, and this is to get further into the essay itself, if you own the means of production, if you've already conquered a people, then you do profit off of Black Death because you own all the things that produce wealth, whether people are raged or not. But that's not what people are talking about. They're talking about some activists or whatever. So it's like during slavery, for instance, you put niggas on a boat and you take them across the ocean. Well, over half of those people are going to die, and you profit off of that because you needed to put as many people as you could so you could sell the people who survived. So you pack the boat so you can have as many people left at the end of it all. Right, like
and then eventually they started getting property insurance.
Yeah.
So then if slaves died en route, they still made money.
Yeah, that's a good example.
They started selling dead bodies to doctors on arrival.
That's a literal profit. Yeah, that's an example.
That's a profit. That are upselling the ones. That are upselling the ones that made it. Like, hey, look, that long journey, not everybody made it, but these are the strongest of the strongest.
31, like.
Yeah. You can use that as like, it's a good so that's profiting off of Black Death. That's literal direct one-to-one.
Can we stop saying reestablishing democracy and just call it for what it is?
Invasion,
setting up capitalism. I'm so sick of hearing, so we can put true democracy in this and let them know it's invasion. It's setting up capitalism.
Yeah, it's just you just need to stabilize. You need to stabilize it so you can exploit it. And it's just a little too unruly right now for you to even be able to exploit it because there's so much violence in these places, not because of the people themselves, but because of the instability that's created by capital, that now you can't even get the shit out of the ground that you need to take from them. Now you can't get them to work. So you need to go in there and stabilize it so you can do those things. That's the only reason.
I'm just sick of hearing that term, like, oh, we're gonna put democracy in this place. Like, no, that's no.
Yeah, that doesn't. I want to shout out Hood Communists because they really do a good job of highlighting sanctions. I got some of these stats out of their pieces, so I want to shout them out. And we might even talk about Haiti next month because there's a lot going on there. But
I do want to talk about Haiti.
So much.
Yeah, so we probably will do that. But so yeah, that was just.
It's not our death that is profitable, but it's what's taking place when we're pissed off, when we're enraged, when we're sad, and when white people are scared. That is really starting to make the money.
Yeah, then all of a sudden you see this just pop up.
So just even looking at 2020, right? in early 2020, as contagious Black Rage was charring U.S. cities in response to the enkindling police murder of George Floyd, a sea of capital flooded the streets to cool off the raging heat. On the government front, the Democratic Party broke their one-month online fundraising record, raising $392 million in just the month of June alone via Act Blue, including a massive $115 million in the first 4 days of June.
4 days.
The Democratic Party.
And did we see any of that?
4 days.
We just saw that money get funneled into more lies. Thereupon capitalizing on the rage from Floyd's murder, which occurred only a week prior on May 25th, posing as the opposition to Black Rage and the hotbed for the white rage, the Republican Party also saw a huge bump in the same month, raising a respectable $131 million. On the philanthropic front, racial equity funding nearly tripled from $5.7 billion in 2019 to $16 billion in 2020. On the corporate front, roughly $50 billion was suddenly pledged by America's 50 biggest public companies and their foundations to fight so-called racial inequality.
So that's
real profit.
Yeah. That's when I've been doing interviews. That's the stuff a lot of people, because I had to give a case study of what I was saying. So I took 2020 and chose 3 different sectors: the nonprofit world, political financing or donations, and then corporations. And a lot of those things are intertwined, obviously. And even if that's not all the money that flooded in, that's a lot of money. That's and that doesn't even document everything. And that was just in June for the political side of things. The racial equity funding, there's a map actually. It's a racial equity foundations, and it shows you like the jump. Like, and there's stuff on that site that's literally just labeled George Floyd protests. Like, they don't even say what it just says: George Floyd protests 2020, and it just puts a number on it, like dead ass, right? So like, it was a major jump, but in 2019 we can see the difference. It clearly is a clear, strong correlation when George Floyd gets murdered, and then people rush to the streets and police stations are burning. All of this money
that
pops
were scared to rush to the street open their wallets.
Yeah. So even if people believed in it, I think I say at the core, Black Rage was the source indirectly financing the entire heist. The failure here is not only in any one front's inability to deliver, but in the extractive structure that funnels the money in their direction at all. The general public may have believed a donation to these state carve-outs was a net positive for Black people, but white capital undoubtedly knew any serious resistance to their rules ceased with the first transaction.
So real quick, let me make sure I got this right. Just for me, correct me. So
the whole podcast is solely just for Terrell, y'all. We're really a scientific experiment. And I'm here for it all every time.
So, because I got up and walked off because this is what happened in my head. George Floyd died, right?
Killed.
Murdered.
He was killed.
Yeah, murdered, yes.
We were outraged. The politicians and everything said they would do this, that, and the third. People that didn't want this type of violence that they knew was going to happen from Black Rage spill into their neighborhoods, and people that wanted the violence to stop, and Black people that wanted their lives to matter, they donated, they voted, they put money into these organizations and everything. Am I wrong?
Yeah, ultimately, like you make the point, like that's what I was trying to get at. It doesn't really matter why people donated. That's why I said, the general public may have believed the donation of these state carve-outs was a net positive for Black people. I don't know. It really doesn't matter, because ultimately that's where the money gets funded. That's where it gets funneled. That's where it gets pushed. That's where the rage goes, because those are the structures that are already in place. So that's where it's going to go, because it's built to take it in that direction. They can just tighten the screws, and next thing you know, it's about putting Kamala Harris, the first Black woman vice president. It just becomes about that, because that's the structures that are in place. So maybe, just like when we, I've made fun of churches and other pods, but like some people genuinely, some old senior citizen people give money to corrupt churches, and they really believe in these folks. Some people
they leave their houses to them when they die.
some people know they're corrupt, but it doesn't really matter what they believe. Those churches
I'm
are going to get that money, right? Like that's the laundering, is they're going to get it anyway. So,
Hey, bro, like I'm literally scared because I got my Black Rage sitting here right now, and tell me, okay, for people who are sitting there like me right now who have my Black Rage, where do we direct that at to where it's not profiting these motherfuckers? Because
I mean,
that shit is aside from
I guess the point is like
get me arrested. Let me not say nothing that's gonna get me arrested.
But the point is like,
but
the rage has to be organized for it to be able to get outside this process. If it's just an individual thing, and this is how they often take advantage of it, then it's easy to take you somewhere else. Because even if you know, like we all three of us know this is bullshit, but we don't have any power necessarily, so we might end up having to support half of the bullshit because we're like, well, we ain't got nowhere else to go. You know what I mean? So like we'll get into more of that in part 2 as far as like how this is often like a labor strike gone wrong. You know what I mean? But like it's
designed that way. I think in a nutshell, to where you're like, well, what do I do with my Black Rage as a person that doesn't profit them? I think the whole point of that is like the state knows that this is going to happen, and then they are going to be enraged. So we've created systems in place that is going to make sure that energy, that money, their labor is coming back to us regardless of how it's going to get dished out. From everybody from the companies who are going to mass produce these t-shirts, because they go, let's see, this is getting news traction. Somebody greenlit it to go on the news. They know that the people are going to be upset. This has got widespread media. I need to make sure I got t-shirts getting printed on every website. People are going to push that out. I need to make sure I got extra overtime going into these police. I'm going to need, there are all types of things that are already in place because they know they're going to make all this back. They know they're going to profit on it because they've already been laundering money from us from the beginning. And so all this money that is getting accumulated, all this surplus labor that is taking place is literally, they've designed it to go back in their pockets unless we collectively are organized enough to make sure. And
so now I feel Black Rage off of the compilation of dollars of my Black Rage.
Yeah, that's what it reproduces itself. That's what I'm saying. Like,
am I tripping?
No, but that's why I said at the beginning. That's why I said it can't be entirely controlled, only managed, because it's an inevitable outcome, right? So it's like you kill people, if you conquer people, they're gonna be mad, right? So just what's gonna happen? So what do I do about that? Like if I'm the state, if I'm white capital, what do I do about that, right? But that's
if you're a white capital, like okay, so this is what I'm thinking. If you're a white capital, I need to take that Black Rage, funnel it into something that's going to put it back into my pockets. Okay, yeah, you're mad about such and such conquering your state and doing this. Hey, wear a T-shirt that's saying that that expresses your Black Rage.
Yeah,
here's a politician who's got a good personality for the folks. And
who somewhat sympathizes with your struggle. Put him in place.
We're going to push this agenda for a while, but we know it's going to go nowhere. But we know that if we say it, they're going to give money, they're going to give time, they're going to give all these things. And it just is a loop. It's a loop of
Yeah. I mean, y'all got it. I think that's a good transition just to go over, like, okay, what puts that in motion? I mean, we've already kind of touched on, like, what puts this process in motion, because 2020 is not the same as 1619 or 1581 or whatever. Like, so this is a process that's been perfected over time, but it's a question of, like, what puts it in motion for it to even get to where it is, right? So, like, that's what I was trying to understand with the laundering part. So, like, you know, like, on a real basic level, like, what is laundering? Initially, I only had one definition, but I wanted to make sure there was several so people didn't think I was just cherry picking. So according to the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network of the U.S. Treasury Department, quote, money laundering is the process of making illegally gained proceeds, i.e. dirty money, appear legal, i.e. clean. End quote. In accordance with FCEN, expert forex trader and head of content for wealth management at JP Morgan. So again, these are not anti-capitalist outlets. James Chin explains how dirty money must, quote, have appeared to have come from a legitimate source The money from the criminal actively is considered dirty, and the process, quote, launders it to make it look clean. That's it's really money. This shit's never really clean. That's like part of the myth of laundering. You just want to make it look like that. Like the point is to create an appearance that legitimizes it. But then the question becomes like, how do you legitimize it? But so there's three stages to laundering. There's placement, there's layering, and then there's integration. So this is Chin again. Placement puts the, quote, dirty money into the legitimate financial system. Layering conceals the source of the money through a series of transaction and bookkeeping tricks. In the final step, integration, the now laundered money is withdrawn from legitimate account to be used for whatever purpose the criminals have in mind for it. So let's play a game. I don't know. What front do we want to have? Name one. We can do any front. Just needs to be something.
Truck.
Barbershop.
What'd you say, Terrell?
Barbershop, taco truck, car wash.
Not all the
rim
regular
shop.
laundering places.
I liked. I did an.
I like rim shop.
There's three stages to laundering. There's placement, there's layering, and then there's integration. So this is Chin again. Placement puts the, quote, dirty money into the legitimate financial system. Layering conceals the source of the money through a series of transaction and bookkeeping tricks. In the final step, integration, the now laundered money is withdrawn from legitimate account to be used for whatever purpose the criminals have in mind for it. So let's play a game. I don't know. What front do we want to have? Name one. We can do any front. Just needs to be something.
Truck.
What'd you say, Terrell?
Barbershop, taco truck, car wash.
Not all the
rim
regular
shop.
laundering places.
I liked. I did an
I like rim shop.
In an interview.
That's big dollars.
In an interview I did, I was just getting creative. I was like, what if we rob prosperity gospel churches? So
I'm not going to hell using this example.
So,
how about we use a taco truck?
No, let's use prosperity gospel churches. So we rob because churches are an easy front because it's literally non-tax deductible.
It's not even taxed.
So let's say we rob church.
I don't think it's non-tax. Like it's almost non-regulated. They don't look at churches for shit.
Nah, it's not really audited very often. So any of these could work. We can use several examples, but let's start with the churches. We'll do taco trucks since that's always on Cam's mind. So if we go out,
I do really want a carne asada right now.
See, if we go out and let's use. No, I'm gonna use both because I just want to see. There's different ways it could work. So placement.
Use the church. We know you want to slander the church. Go for it. Live your truth. And
so if we've been sticking up Joel Osteen or whomever else, and we're taking their money right at home with Cam.
Pause. Nigga, you know we not robbing Joel Osteen.
We should.
Yeah. It's the point.
We should.
The point here is the analogy, not whether we're actually going to do it. We rob prosperity gospel churches. We have to but we've been taking all this money that we can't prove is our income. So how do we legitimize the money? So we start our own church. So then we start a church. We claim that the money is donations. Let's say we have 200 church members and we divide $20,000 amongst 200 church members. And that's the placement stage. That's how we enter the money in. Once we've gotten the money into the church, then we start taking that 20,000 and we start investing in other things. We buy a property, we buy cars, we buy equipment for the church, we buy all these different things for the church so we can fill it in and make it look like it's a legitimate enterprise. Then once money starts coming back in through the church, now that money is cleaned, and that's the integration of the money. That's the process. We can do the same thing with a taco truck. If we take
even within that, we saw this on P Valley. The church needed some money in order to get something done, and they wasn't getting enough funds from the offering, and so she went right down to her daughter at the strip club, took her money, washed it through the church so the church can get some shit done, and then gave it to her back on the back end.
And the church here, I use this analogy partially because the church is considered a respectable enterprise, more so than even a taco truck or anything else because it's like, oh, they pray to
They work
God.
that
Like
up.
it's seen as a really noble thing, even if it's ultimately corrupt. So it's a great front, like to launder the
We're
money.
not saying that churches are corrupt.
No, I'm saying if you're trying to launder
Them.
money, many of them are, but if you're trying to launder money, uh, again, I said
And even in that
prosperity.
capacity, she was exploiting.
I'll be trying.
I
I'm
said
really trying.
prosperity gospel churches, very particular. I'm not robbing corner store churches. We are not doing that. I said prosperity gospel churches, people that have 50, they fill up football stadiums and they have endowments from white folks that are often funding
No. So that way
those
it
people.
makes sense. It
Yeah.
makes sense. Whereas you got a couple church members that are donating $2,000 and $3,000.
Yeah, the big
Yeah.
money. The big
Yeah.
money. People writing $10,000 checks.
Prosperity, we're robbing. So we are doing a good deed by robbing prosperity gospel churches, not robbing the corner store church that does good work in the hood. We're not robbing them. We are robbing the
Osteen's. Lakewood
yes,
is getting
that's who we're robbing. So I just want people to be clear on that. I mean, I have no moral.
Then you got
And
a
Joel
person.
Osteen wouldn't even let people in when Hurricane hit Houston. So
Yeah.
fuck Joel Osteen.
Fuck that nigga.
I don't care who comes.
But then
in
you
the
got
comments for that.
you got people like, we'll say me. Maybe I got my drug enterprise and maybe I'm cool with the pastor and I need to funnel $250,000 through this church.
Yeah, but you would have to. The thing is, if you had 250 grand, you couldn't choose a church with 10 members because that's not even believable. You'd have to choose.
I need a big church.
Yeah, you would have to choose a bigger church to if you want to clean
I
it.
need a church that where $1,000 from $2,000 or $3,000 from one member is
Realistic.
normal.
Yeah.
Realistically.
So that's how you would. But again, the money is never actually cleaned. It's just made to appear so because now it's moved from one place to another inside the church, and now we think it's clean, right? And we see this.
They had me on the church board as a board member or
deacon or whatever.
Deacon, somebody that's gonna get some kind of check from the church, like a responsible check or a legitimate check from the church.
That's what we just described is what people typically understand as money laundering. In the essay, I talk about Breaking Bad, and Walter White literally buys a car wash, so he could. So he
doesn't always. It doesn't even have to be big numbers. Like I put $250,000 into this church, and they keep 50,000. This is a church.
Yeah.
They'll be happy with 10,000.
And if I get more money, what do? I just get another front. I find another church. I find another church. Right.
We learned it from the Italian mob when they would do different situation with banks and businesses.
Yeah, like but then the whole point ultimately is to legitimize what you're doing. But then the question becomes, this is where I try to flip it on its head, because then the question becomes, what makes money clean versus dirty? I just
want to get into the thing, like money laundering is not a new concept. It's not nothing that we haven't dealt with before. Like it's not a new concept.
Nah, it's just that most of the time we look at it as all the stuff we just described. It's the mob, it's Walter White, it's us robbing churches, it's the taco truck. Yeah, it's somebody outside of the system that's doing something bad, and then the real clean money is the United States and its banks and all of that. But when we go out and sell drugs or when we do something quote unquote illegal, that's seen bad. But ultimately, these definitions don't really hold up. So I think I said typically definitions of money laundering assume a clear line between good and bad that is easily identified, legal versus illegal, citizen versus criminal, clean versus dirty. Although so-called criminals may conceal their illicit activity, the definitions assume criminality, both the criminal and the criminal behavior, is neatly defined. These definitions fail to acknowledge how the state socially constructs the rigid categories of good and bad and the subsequent laws that govern them. For the example, the U.S. often facilitates the very activity it claims it criminalized, such as laundering money to fund anti-communist wars in Nicaragua, while outlawing money laundering at home. Yet, since the state creates the law, it can pardon its own activity, make it look clean. So what gives it legitimacy? What source makes capitalism a legitimate financial system? If we're seen as bad because we stole from we stole from Joel Osteen, which I don't even think is bad, but we're seen as bad for doing that.
At all.
And you're seen as bad for selling drugs or whatever you do. But I'm like, how did this country, this colony, how did this come into existence? So I wrote, the irredeemable source at the core of capitalism, endlessly breeding the entire structure, is conquest. As Pan-Africanist psychiatrist and political philosopher Frantz Fanon makes strikingly clear in his text toward the African Revolution, quote, the colonial situation is first of all a military conquest continued and reinforced by a civil and police administration. Put differently, the continuation and reinforcement of the colony is to launder the spoils of imperial conquest. With each conquest, industries were built and expanded around the globe with resources pillaged from the previously conquered. Later, I say, conquest begets conquest. Crimes enacted on one population become seed capital for the next crime of capitalist production on another. With stolen resources from stolen land, stolen people will be unaffordable and vice versa. Laundering arises as a colonial act of legitimizing each conquest. So when you take money from, or when you rob, steal, enslave, genocide people, take their land, resources, and then you call it the United States of America, that's its own front, and then you set up institutions to launder what you stole from them, and then you move it through. So I say, at its base, money laundering is capitalism. Early stage merchant capitalists primitively accumulated wealth from, quote, criminal activities via slavery, genocide, and dispossession. As land, people, and resources were being stolen, capitalists invested their felonious profits into constructing a state of fronts to do the laundering, quote, or management. Consider that the placement stage. These fronts established the necessary laundering institutions such as government, law, banking, commerce, education, tax collecting, media, etc., as well as violent enforcement agencies of police and military, thereby concealing capitalist crimes and making their blood money appear clean through reinvestment. Layering. By capitalists legitimizing themselves via the organized crime of state making, the nefarious behaviors disappeared through Heisenbergian rationalizations such as a more perfect union or the white man's burden. Invaders became founders, thieves became businessmen, human beings became chattel, and indigenous lands became colonies. Integration. So that's the actual laundering.
So the United States defined money laundering as, hey, we did that to y'all, but y'all can't do that shit to us.
Nah, because it's like you've conquered everything, and then you've set up some shit. Then then you don't want to just say this is just conquest. Instead of just saying that, you like, well, we have a bank, and we have an economy, and we have businesses.
Destiny said we should do this.
Right. That you create all these fronts and all this propaganda to somehow act like this is anything other than conquest.
Money laundering, sir. That sounds like money laundering. We did that before, but we're not going to talk about that. You can't do that shit here.
Yeah.
And then, of course, if they were going to figure out a way to launder everything else and wrap everything else up in a pretty bow, they were going to find ways to actually benefit off of our rage, our anger as a whole. On top of that, I think one quote that I really enjoyed in the essay is whereas wealth is being accumulated, so is suffering and death. This contradiction eventually bleeds through the eyes of the conquered. It is in this colonial process of conquest, the dialectic between wealth and death, that Black Rage finds its form, in which all Black Rage originates.
When you rob, steal, and kill, somebody's going to be angry. It's really not that deep. So it's just like, if you do that, as I said, I think I wrote, as Fanon articulated, the people come to understand that wealth is not the fruit of labor, but the result of organized, protected robbery. This is Fanon. This is a great quote. Then I say
that one more time.
The people come to understand that wealth is not the fruit of labor, but the result of organized, protected robbery. That is the state. So that white capital, the people who own all this shit, set all this up. And, again, the definition of the state I gave Rasul, and anyone that listens to this show knows that we don't define the state simply as the government. Rasul does. That's not how it's defined. I talked about this on Millennials Killing Capitalism. We had a slight debate, or not really a debate, but a discussion on that. And then anyway, later or after that quote from Fanon, Black Rage uninterrupted is the opposition to conquest, which is the protected robbery of white capital managed by the state. Consequently, in the inevitable moments when Black Rage migrates to the surface of the colony, laundering is set in motion. So you have to, so you got to figure out how you gonna launder the very thing that is in response to your laundering in the first place. You have to turn it into a commodity because that's the only way to manage it.
That's crazy.
So we're gonna do a part 2 on this. So we're gonna kind of quit here, but I want to just so I have 3 phases. This is what we'll deal with in part 2 because that's another 2 hours. But like I said, as established prior, laundering is the maintenance and perpetuation of imperial conquest administered by the white capitalist state. Rage is an inescapable outcome of conquest. To enslave, steal, and kill is to become your own gravedigger. This is not lost on the conquering class of white capital. As Walter Rodney once said to a crowd of Guyanese comrades, quote, "When you dedicate yourself to oppressing others, you cannot sleep," end quote. This means long before police precincts scorch the stolen earth or the colony is amassed with revolution, mechanisms are developed to bring Black Rage to heel.
So in part 2, we're going to talk about like what those mechanisms are, how they came to be, and how they are still being used to this day to funnel our Black Rage into tools for the state to exploit. Yay!
So again, coming back to the myth, if people are feeling a little lost on that, you shouldn't. But if you feel lost, like what we just broke down the laundering to was to understand what sets the commodification, what people often call co-optation of Black Rage, what sets it in motion. So you have to at first understand, because often people jump to the co-optation. Oh, they took our rage and turned it to, but what's in place for that to happen? That's what I was trying to understand. That's what we're trying to get at. Often we just jump and we see the book or we see the person that we think is profiting, but what sets it in motion? So if we don't understand what sets it in motion, then it becomes this very moralistic argument about, oh, these are just bad people. But if every generation this keeps happening and it actually gets worse, then we need, then the reason I was trying to investigate this is like there must be something else in motion beyond just I'm a bad person or Terrell's a bad person. That could be part of it, but that's clearly more to it than just like, oh, these are just bad people. There's more to it. So like in part 2, we're gonna get more into like that process. Like, but at first we had to lay out this entire thing is an operation of conquest. And then this entire thing is laundering said conquest so it can continue to conquest and maintain that. That's the process of capital. That's the process of the capitalist state. Like that's what we're dealing with here. So to understand anything else, that needs to be identified and established. So like we said, profiting off of Black Death doesn't quite get at it. Now that breakdown that Cameron gave on slavery, that's a more apropos example of literally profiting off of Black Death. Yeah. You know, like you have insurance on dead slaves. That's profiting off of Black Death. Writing a book after all that's happened is just crumbs compared to the fact that happened.
It's still not okay.
No.
We're not saying that it's okay. But it's just a really small piece in a far larger puzzle. And
it's also to say if you're only
intentional, the state is intentional and about making sure that specific people are getting, and not like, oh, a specific person, like they picked you out individually, but the state is really intentional about throughout the ways in which they are going to hold every other piece of the puzzle in order to make theirs and to keep their system flowing. They wanted to make sure that there's a couple pieces of this puzzle that everybody else gets, that they get to get a little bite off of.
And that's called a bribing. That's another major part of laundering is bribery. So the book deal is often a bribe, even if you, as the author, legitimately think you're writing a good book. Like you may not even be trying to take advantage of it, but the bribes are just baked into how this works anyway. Wages, bribes, because we already established that your labor is being stolen. So wages are just bribes, like to keep you working so you come back later, like to keep working so they can continue the laundering. Just bribes, right? So it's like there's bribes and then there's just flat out repression. right?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I think that covers it. We'll get into more in part 2. Thank y'all for engaging this. It was weird going over something I wrote myself, but it did make this a lot easier episode because I didn't have to read somebody else's shit. I already read somebody else's shit to write it.
It was better to do it this way because at first I was like, we should just interview you like we would a guest. And you would have really been uncomfortable then.
Yeah, that would have been weird.
That would have been hilarious. That would have been hilarious. But also, I want to make sure we give a big shout out to the Malcolm Effect, where our host 2 Black was a guest on part 1 and part 2 episodes. If y'all want to go on Spotify, I believe it's on Apple Podcast and
anything you want to hear. I list all of them because there's a Malcolm Effect, there was Dr. Balls, I Mix What I Like, there was
I want to specifically shout out the Malcolm Effect because that's the one I listened to, and I love that one. I like that. That. Exactly. Also, shout out to Dr. Ball,
always.
a great supporter of our podcast and everything we got going on. So shout out to him, and I'm gonna throw it to Black to close this out.
Yeah, shout out to all the guests we've had because honestly, a lot of them are cited in the essay. I have 91 different sources in there, but I've cited a lot of the people cited in there. Dr. Joy James is cited, Dr. Bald, Dr. CBS, obviously Rasul, Hood Communist is cited. A lot of people that we've had throughout the years on the show. That's why I said this feels like a group project. Maybe I'm the one that put the words on paper, but it feels like a group project because all the work we've been doing on this show gave me half of the sources, you know what I mean? So, but yeah, thank you everybody for coming through again. There'll be a part 2. Peace out. Oh, and read the whole essay, not just snippets that we gave you. But all right, peace out.
Okay. Fresh out the plane in a whole nother state. I'm trying to eat down a whole nother plate. Seem like my homies was stuck in the hood. I just told